good now, whenever and wherever this finds you. For me, today is New Year's Day. I was feeling positive about a turning point in the transition to where I believe more people are gathering to change the system than are left fighting for or against the system. And that positive feeling was put on steroids this morning when I read the post from Copiosis. Copiosis is a bridging technology to get us from money to a truly resource based economy where we live in shared abundance. And so while Perry, the founder, revealed all that's falling in place with Copiosis, it's still, he's saying, 2.5 years that we have to get it together. And it'll probably take that to get all the people on board. So, speaking of getting on board, maybe you don't even know what Copiosis is. So, let me say.
I just wanted to start off. Could you tell the listeners who have no idea about what copiosis is? Just give them a little elevator pitch. What is this thing? What are we talking about?
Sure. So Copiosis is a socioeconomic innovation we've put together to eventually replace capitalism worldwide. Essentially, how it works is we have created a system that enables people to live their passions and then get rewarded by engaging with their passions and producing what we call a net benefit. So essentially what happens is all of humanity's necessities, so that's food, clothing, shelter, education, and healthcare, are provided to everyone at no cost. The population is divided into producers and consumers. So the consumers of the necessities, when they receive them at no cost, a net benefit is produced because obviously you're feeding people, you're keeping people healthy, you're keeping people under roofs, et cetera. So the producers that are providing those things are rewarded a new system, like a credit, a new system of reward that we call net benefit rewards. And the net benefit rewards, the quantity of the reward given to a given producer for the benefit he or she creates, is determined by a process wrapped within an algorithm that we use to measure what the net benefit value of the producer's action is. So when someone feeds another person, or when someone takes care of their child, or when someone teaches someone else's child to read, a benefit is produced. And the benefit is determined by, generally speaking, the negative consequences of the action subtracted from the positive consequences of the action. And if that calculus is net positive, the actor receives a reward. And the reward can be used by the actor to consume anything other than necessities. So we call those luxuries. Capital goods are provided to any producer at no cost to them, just like necessities are provided. So essentially, in Copiosis, a person lives free of debt and able to pursue their passions. They don't have to earn a living, so they can pursue their passions freely. And we believe that when a human being pursues their passion, it's impossible for that human being not to create net benefit for people and the planet. And so those people are rewarded when they produce that net benefit, and society just pretty much does what they do today without the necessity of a capitalist framework.
So if it's going to take, as Perry thinks, 2.5 years to get the demonstration projects up and running and a majority of people supporting this idea and participating, what are we going to do till then? I mean, there is the reality that people are homeless, hungry, needing assistance, and not to mention people that have just decided that uh, work's not worth their life and have chosen alternatives. So, what are we going to do about it now? And luckily for us, there's a process that's been underway for I don't know, maybe 10 years. Is deliberative polling.
So our question is, can democratic deliberation solve our extreme partisan polarization? And we approach this through a method that I call deliberative polling, which is not the same as ordinary polling. It's sort of built on top of it. We begin with a survey of the public, but then we gather the sample together, either face-to-face or online, for in-depth deliberation in small group discussions, plenary sessions where the experts from competing points of view answer questions developed in the small groups, and the small groups and plenary sessions alternate. And the discussions are moderated in small groups and permit the participants to come to an informed judgment over a weekend of deliberation, and they register their final considered judgment in confidential questionnaires, so we don't get the pressures of consensus in a jury verdict. And we have large enough numbers that we can evaluate the representativeness and the opinion changes statistically. So in effect, we put America in one room.
So this can be done now and is being done now. And this will lead to a system that's referred to as citizen assembly. And that's where...
Okay, hi everybody, my name's Louise and I've come from Dublin in Ireland to share my experience. So my experience is quite different than everybody on the panel. I was one of the randomly selected assembly members on the Irish Citizens Assembly that took part from 2016 to 2017. I answered a knock on my door one day and there was a guy there just with a clipboard and he was asking me questions and said, would you like to take part in this assembly? I really had no idea what he was talking about. I've no political background, no real engagement in anything political or social to much extent in my life. I should say that it was August and I had been at home for 2 full months with my 3 children, and this man was standing on my doorstep offering to bring me to a hotel once a month to talk to grown-ups about grown-up things. So I said, yes, okay, I don't care what it is, I'm going. Don't tell everyone that, I know it's been live streamed, but there you go. I want to say that I did it for the civic, yeah, but sometimes you just have to get the carrot to get in the door, and then I was hooked once I was in. That's the true story. So that's how I got involved. Basically, there was no other way about it. That's how I got involved, and we started in October 2016, and we ended our deliberations on our first topic in May 2017. As a direct result of our recommendations, the government set up a parliamentary committee which basically went through a mini citizens assembly. They had their own version of it, just an abridged version. And then the country went to a referendum, and we saw basically within a percentage point that the country voted exactly as 100 citizens had voted to change the abortion laws in Ireland. So it was fascinating to see that, given that once we had made our recommendations and published them, there was widespread shock, awe, horror. Oh my God, this has gone too far, this will never pass. But it did, it really did. And the deliberations that we had, I suppose, paved the way for the rhetoric and for the discussion and for the talking points to change, because a topic like abortion is obviously very polarizing a topic. So we had in the media, we had very much a strong yes and we had very much a strong no, and the sense was through the assembly process that really there was the black and the white, but the vast majority of people sat in this wide grey area in the middle. And what the Citizens' Assembly allowed to come about was for time and space to be given to that grey area, to allow people to discuss, to allow people to hear from experts, and to allow people to give some deep thought and deep, attention to a topic. And it's not the only topic we discussed. At the end of that set of recommendations, we moved on to our climate change recommendations, which are now coming up for the parliamentary committee going on at the moment in relation to how we're going to take up some of those recommendations. But I'll end by saying that it's very important to get to the point where we have more day-to-day people involved in large decisions. The assumption is that, you know, my opinion doesn't really matter. What would I know about that? How would I be able to affect any change? But I believe if there is a mechanism there and there is a process available, that people will engage with it if they are asked. But you have to ask people to get involved. And I think that what we're seeing in Ireland now, and we've just called now what will be our third Citizens' Assembly. So the first one, there was a bunch of recommendations, but we had our marriage equality referendum out of that. So we were the first country to put into law, constitutional right to same-sex marriage. That was in 2015. 2018, we had the abortion referendum. We're now having a Citizens' Assembly has just been called for two topics. One is for gender equality, and the second one is actually a more local one, which is our first time to do something local. We've always gone big. Now we're trying to get a little bit more micro on it. So it's around the Dublin City Council and how the City Council is run, which is new. So that was really all I wanted to say, is that, you know, as much as possible, the more that these types of initiatives can reach a variety of people from all walks of life, the more benefit for everybody, because everybody has something to offer. Everybody, from the truck driver to the person who's a CEO of a very large firm. I've seen it in roundtable discussions in a hotel, week in, week out. Everybody had something to contribute, and that's what needs to be heard.
And I have a question for Louise about the Citizen Assembly. And I was particularly curious about how the random selection process works, and wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that.
So it was stratified random selection. So it was basically every fourth house, the chap was knocking on the door. Now, if you understand where I live in the middle of nowhere, so it's quite unusual that anybody would ever knock on my door. So that was it. He had his demographics, he had his stratified. He was trying to fill his. He asked me a bunch of questions at the start. You know, age, background, you know, whatever. He was trying to categorize me to see if he needed one of me, and turned out he did, and so that's how it worked. He worked for a private polling company, so it went out to tender. The government put it out to tender to a polling company who would often go around and do kind of market research type polls. So it was a guy from that company. So just to speak a little bit about within the Citizens' Assembly that I was a part of. It was very important for us as a group, and each weekend we had a different table and a different group. We were intentionally mixed every time. So a very important part of our method of operation was our code of conduct and the facilitation at the tables. So without strong facilitators at each table, you better be really careful, because, you know, some people can take over the conversation and that can be very demotivating for others. So from just a day-to-day part, you know, it's very important to have really good facilitators. What was interesting for me personally that happened outside of the Citizens' Assembly was the skills that you learn as part of a group like an assembly. Those are skills that you're going to have for the rest of your life. They are skills that you're mirroring from others, you're learning from watching others. It's just from being in the room, you're seeing how to have very difficult conversations, how to find common ground, how to ask questions. Now, obviously, one of the topics that we were talking about was really personal and a very difficult topic. And I thought maybe that was why we were all being so polite and nobody was really kind of saying what they felt, or, you know. And I genuinely thought, okay, that's why this is like this. But it was actually the same for all the other topics. You know, the tone was set where people were just curious. There was an atmosphere of curiosity, and there was also an atmosphere of people took this very seriously. They took it very seriously. They thought, I've been asked to do this really important job, and I'm going to take it really seriously, and I'm going to do my best. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to try to understand all this crazy stuff that these absolute PhD head people are saying to me, and I have no idea what they're saying. And you're trying to make sense of people who have 10 years of academic learning and deep knowledge on a subject, and you're just coming in off the street and you have no idea about some of these topics at all, and you're trying your best to listen to that, to try to contextualize it, to try and discuss it, to try and piece it apart, and then to try and say, right, well, what can we do next that's going to be impactful, that's going to make a change, that's going to be meaningful? Because the worst thing you can do in a situation like that is to make recommendations that are going to be defunct, almost immediately. You want to be thinking about, right, what's the current situation, but what's the future situation? And can we do things now that are going to prevent us being in this, situation down the line? So it's really to try and put your future head on as well. So the skills that you learn, and you also then, you become motivated, not just politically, but socially. So it mobilized a lot of women that had never even considered politics or social engagement on any level. So, if you can get people to engage with the process, from the next step, you don't know, you have a little champion and they're going to go off and they're going to create all sorts of conversations with people, and they're going to educate each other, and everybody brings each other along the way.
What's been found out when people use this, like Taiwan, they've used this system, and most people agree with most people about most things. And what we see presented to us are outliers, and of which I am one. But even I, with an open mind and information and facilitation, can change. And I do change, and I like to change. I like to move in a more positive way. So that brings us full circle to why I feel positive today. And it is my hope that you'll take this information and mull on it and consider it and join a process where we can come together and actually make some of these things happen. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you down the road.